Hey guys, Two-Time Marine here with another video today talking about the pros and cons of being an officer versus being enlisted and vice versa. Kind of what are the pros of each and what are the cons of each. Now, as you know, as you should know, I was enlisted. I was a sergeant before I got out, and I prefer enlisted over officer any day. But that's just how I am. Some people want to go the officer route, which is excellent. We need good officers. The pros for officers, in my opinion, are, one, the pay is better. You get paid a shit ton more than enlisted do. Two, you can say that you're, a lieutenant or a captain or whatever in the Marine Corps, which is pretty cool. You get to make some major decisions, which this could be, I guess, a con as well, depending on how you look at it. But officers are given a lot of responsibility. As a captain, for example, you're in charge of an entire company or entire battery of Marines, which, when you deploy, can be, good between 200 and 300, depending on your unit. So between 200 and 300 Marines are your responsibility. Every injury they take, every death that happens, is your responsibility. And for some people, that's just too much pressure, too much responsibility, and that's just something they don't want to deal with, which is fine. That is a lot to have on your shoulders, which is why they're very, very tough on officers. The training is not easy. They only look for the best. They look for intelligent people. And then they try to weed out those that can't deal with that sort of stress. It doesn't always work. You're still going to get people through there that end up breaking during combat, and that's going to happen. But officers in general have a ton of responsibility. And so, for me, that's a plus in my eyes. I always loved the responsibility. By the time I was 20, I was a section chief, and I was in charge of between 10 and 15 Marines, and the gun, my howitzer, all the ammo, the gun truck and the ammo truck, and then all the other various equipment that we had, and it totaled easily $10 million worth of stuff that I was in charge of. Plus the Marines' lives, plus the Marines downrange that we're shooting for. Because a lot of times we would shoot relatively close to the infantry, and we would use our HE rounds to basically soften up the enemies so that the grunts could fucking move in and clear them out. And for someone that's 20 years old, it's a lot of responsibility, but I loved it, and I was good at it. And so an officer, they're going to be in charge of a lot more than that. So it's just something you gotta be aware of. The the pluses of being enlisted, for me, is you're actually down on the ground working. You're actually in there. Fucking, if you're infantry, and you're a private through sergeant, basically, you're in there. You're the one kicking indoors. You're the one actually pulling the lanyard on a howitzer, making the howitzer fire. You're down there doing that sort of work, and that's the sort of work I loved. If I could have done 20 years and stayed a sergeant the whole time, I would have done it. Because once you get to staff sergeant and above, you're still involved in that stuff a little bit, but not to the same extent. You start to worry about paperwork and just other things where, when you're below that, you're actually in there. You're the one fighting. You're the one kicking butt and taking names. And that's just where I prefer to be, which is one of the main reasons why I didn't re-enlist, because I just didn't want to deal with paperwork and all that other kind of crap. So for me, that was the biggest plus. Phil, my dogs are being annoying. For me, that was the biggest plus, being down there in that. Because I didn't join the Marine Corps to do paperwork or to fucking sit around and deal with that sort of shit. Will you two stop? My dogs are fucking being so loud right now. And for me, that was a big plus. Some of the negatives of being enlisted are, you're not going to get as much pay as the officers. I think, what was it? A first lieutenant Was it a first or second? Let's go to the second lieutenant. The boot ass lieutenant you can think of. Right when they get to the fleet, and I mean they've been in for a while at this point. Don't get me wrong. They've gone through OCS. They've done all their training and stuff, and so they've been in for an okay amount of time. But they don't know jack shit. They're the fucking boot of the boot, and they're in charge of Marines, which is kind of scary. But they're the boot of the boot, and a lot of them are only 22, 23 years old, and they make as much as a staff sergeant who's been in for 10 years. Is I believe the numbers that I looked up. And so, money-wise, as enlisted, it's not nearly as good, compared to the officers. But people that do enlisted do it because they love that sort of work. And that's all there is to it. But for some of you, that may be a negative. If you go into it with having kids and stuff, pay is a big part of it. You have to be able to make some money. Because kids are fucking expensive, which I'm learning. But in the end, you should really go with what you want. Generally, officers stay in longer. I believe they have to do in the Marine Corps at least. I can't really speak for anyone else, but I believe they have to do 8 years in the Marine Corps before they can get out. I believe it's 8 years. They can resign their commission at any time, is my understanding, but most officers try not to go that route. But you can get out after 8 years, I believe, which for enlisted is 4 years. You have 4 years inactive, which they can still call you back, but during that time you're a civilian. So yeah, and I think that's it. I mean, both really have their plus and minuses, and some things I've recommended to people is to go in, do 4 years as enlisted, get the feel for it, and then if you want to be an officer after that, they have programs for enlisted guys who've done well, who aren't fuck ups basically, to become officers. And I knew a guy, he was a sergeant, and he went and he became an officer, and he's an officer now. So actually, I've known a couple. One of our docs did that, and he did the Navy. He's an officer in the Navy. Actually, no. I think he became a Marine pilot. I'll have to hit him up. I don't remember if he's a Marine pilot or a Navy pilot. But either way, those options exist. So that's kind of what I recommend to people because that way you can kind of experience both. But in the end, it's obviously up to you. So if you guys have any questions, concerns, comments, hit me up, and I will see you in the next one. Semper Fi.